Second episode of our podcast, where together we're going to be diving into different phenomena, theories, literary works, sounds, films, or aspects of culture that expand on the themes explored by Soapbox or that are related to the city of Amsterdam, where our podcast is based in. As we anticipate the upcoming release of the newest edition of the Soapbox Journal, of which the theme is swamp, we wanted to return to and elaborate on this topic as it has been explored in the previous episode. We invite you to give it a listen. Coming back to the questions of how does the swamp speak or how can we listen to the swamp, this time we would like to explore the possible answers by engaging with different elements and qualities of the boggy spaces and how they manifest in cultural objects. To do that, each of us researched swampy occurrences in culture, and we're here to share them with you, as well as discuss together our findings. So, without further ado, let's submerge ourselves in the realm of the wetlands. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Unbox the Soap podcast. My name is Franek.
I'm Julia.
I'm Dennis.
I'm Lucia.
And this is the second episode of our podcast, where together we're going to be diving into different aspects of culture.
I think the connecting theme is gonna be swamp and the social, the political, maybe swamp and human, but in the community. I don't know if that's the correct way to put it, but I'm excited also. I think we have a very diverse section today for you, so I'm excited. I thought it would be very interesting to kind of look at the city and the swamp, since a lot of cities are actually built on swamps and like wetlands, which I think is often forgotten, and I didn't really know that. I think the mostly like recognized example is London, which I'm gonna look at today, but also through music, not only through landscape. I picked up the two songs, both are from jazz. One of them is Schlam from the band Błoto. It's a Polish band which was kindly recommended to me by Lucia, so thank you. I really enjoyed it, but there what really grasped my attention was the music video, actually. A music video which shows a corporate worker who is late to work and finally stands up to his bad boss, and after punching him in the face, he's chased by the security guard throughout the city, and he finally finds refuge in the swamp, and the music actually accompanies the chase until it finally accumulates and the man finds shelter in the swamp. But actually there's someone waiting there for him, a ghost-like figure of a woman who lures him into the swamp, and she tries to drag him back to the city, to the familiarity of an urban life, but he refuses and escapes yet again. And it's a very interesting music video. I didn't really expect it. And actually Schlam means sludge and slime. And it's a consistency often associated with the swamp. It's a part of the city and it sucks in everything, in the counters. And during the chase, actually, the security guard slips on the sludge. And that's why the man is able to escape, and he's finally free of the city and the modes of power that the security guard represents. And I actually found some really interesting theory from Giblett. He wrote a book, Cities and Wetlands, and he borrows from psychoanalysis and says that in the city as well, the repressed always returns, as the repressed is never totally suppressed or destroyed. Wow, that's some tongue twister. And the repressed comes back repeatedly, both in the music video, I think, and in the sound itself. The melody kind of draws out the sludge on the street. It's enticing for all of the characters and makes them trip, fall, wander, chase, get lost. And I think the jazz kind of genre really fits here because the keyboards and the drums create what David Thoreau calls the quaking zone, a place and space of both fear and hope, which is really seen in the video, I would say. So with that in mind and with the context of the music video, maybe you guys have something interesting to add to it, or like maybe your object connects in any way.
Yeah, actually, I looked into swamps as a kind of alternative shelter for people, especially throughout history. I looked into like American Southern history, and I found out about the swamp called the Great Dismal Swamp. It's a swamp that's bordering Eastern Virginia and North Carolina, or exists within the borders of those two states. And it has historically been like a place of refuge for escaped slaves. So there's a lot of actually literature, abolitionist literature, written about the Great Dismal Swamp. It's a huge swamp, and right now I think it's like this conserved wildlife center. But basically, its history is really rich in resistance, and yeah, there's some poetry written about it as well. The poetry is written from mostly like the voice of anti-abolition or abolitionists, sorry, like white people.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not much necessarily literature that came from the escaped slaves, but yeah, basically it's like a place that has created refuge for those that were suffering under slavery, and it's seen as like a really hazardous and dangerous environment, especially by European settlers and colonizers, the British. It gets its name from this guy like William Drummond, who quote unquote discovered the swamp and called it the most dismal place on earth. So that's why it's called the Great Dismal Swamp. But actually, it has created a habitat or offered a habitat for those who were basically tortured under slavery. And even in its most hazardous conditions, it was still a better living space and offered better living conditions than living under a slave owner, basically.
That also,
yeah,
like, because that reminded me of this one reading I had for environmental humanities course, and it was about Behind the Colonial Silence of Wilderness by Malcolm Ferdinand. And this like also talks about the Great Dismal Swamp in a way that this author, Malcolm Ferdinand, they argue with this other person who released a paper that was like in Wilderness Lies the Liberation of the World on Maroon Ecology and Partisan Nature. And Malcolm Ferdinand argues with them because Malm thinks of these spaces as like wild and like this like different realm than humanity.
Yeah.
And from what I remember in the reading, Ferdinand is kind of like, no, but this is like not the wild that you expect, because the swamp and stuff like that, it was already inhabited by the Native American people and stuff like that, and it was already like processed by them. So we can never fully access like a wild nature, a wild swamp, because there's always been somebody living there making it for them. And it's actually that's basically once again imposing the colonial perspective on how we understand, for example, swamps.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Great Dismal Swamp is also initially like a place of indigenous folklore. A lot of indigenous communities have inhabited it before the white man, discovered, quote unquote, again.
So, in relation to what you all have been saying, I also kind of researched an example of a community a disparate community of people that somehow rallies behind the swamp and kind of with the swamp as well, talks through the swamp. And it's the community of swamp poppers. And swamp pop
Love it.
is a genre of music that came about in the 1950s in southern Louisiana as a result of the region's specific geography and ethnic composition. And the term swamp here holds multiple meanings. So geographically, the music emerged from areas known for their swampy landscapes, specifically the bayous and wetlands of Louisiana. So a lot of like their songs reference this and use the swamp as kind of like a backdrop to the story that they're trying to tell. And culturally, the region is also heavily influenced by its swamps, because culturally the region is influenced by its swamps, and hence the sound of the music as well. So perhaps if we conceptualize the swamp as this kind of space of in-betweenness, of transition, as swamps are neither land nor water, as a space with its own slow temporality, the swamp kind of invites a sound that is very similar to this, a sound that is complex, diverse, mellow, and slow. And this type of swamp pop music is exactly that. Like, it kind of mimics the action of wading through the mud very slowly with its like bellowing saxophones, blues beats, emotional vocals, and stuff like this. And actually, talking about the swamp as a place of transition, and again, coming back to these communities that are rallied kind of within the swamp, it was very much kind of a genre of music that is influenced by New Orleans rhythm and blues, both country, western, Cajun and Black Creole music, French and English, rural and urban, folk and mainstream. So it's kind of like this genre holds exactly the space of in-betweenness between what we kind of conceptualize as these sorts of binaries, whether it's kind of like city binaries, you have the city and the rural, but you never kind of see them intermixed together. So kind of this genre defies categorization in a sense. And it is kind of created exactly from these Cajun and Black Creole peoples who are native to South Louisiana. The thing that interested me the most about swamp pop is that it's such a diverse music genre, and it's very hybrid. And just like the swamp, which is very biodiverse, it's a melting pot of different plant and animal species. Swamp pop, and like specifically the region of South Louisiana, is a melting pot of different cultures, with swamp pop to show as kind of like the natural result of their collision and interaction. And actually, swamp pop was described kind of as a gumbo, which is a traditional South Louisiana dish that blends Cajun and Creole cooking, which comes to show like it expresses that swamp pop is an expression of the difference and multiraciality born amid like this stark racial segregation in 90s 50s America, and the genre grew kind of from the interactions between Cajun and Black Creoles, the relations of who were also marked by racism. Yet these musicians were able to put their perceived differences aside and admire each other's work, often borrowing elements, exchanging melodies and tunes, making this genre of music really something that's kind of, I feel, unheard of, or I personally haven't seen such a type of music that could be marked as kind of interracial or like inherently interracial, which, coming back to the theme of swamp, really shows how like this fluid structure of this ecosystem can translate into reality somehow.
I was raised on swamp pop music in the heart of the bayou land. Warren Storms, my house of memories. Johnny Patton singing Promised Land. Westland, Big Blue Diamond. Loneliness by Robert on. Cookie and the cupcakes and then girl Matilda.
Super nice.
And also it's interesting to see like a genre of music really born from a landscape and like taking inspiration, maybe not even directly, but just through the people inhabiting that space. You realize that the aesthetics of the swamp like transpose themselves onto the music. Also I guess like blues and jazz has this very revolutionary air, like it's very based in it comes from Black people and African Americans, so there's this like revolutionary air to it, and I think the swamp also has this almost revolutionary quality to it, maybe in some ways unexplainable why, but the fact that it's so kind of opposed to the city and these settlements, which were maybe trying to get away from the swamp because of its hazardous conditions, its heat, it's like the poisonous creatures living there. And yet, like, the self-freed slave was able to, find solace or find some sort of freedom, and also prefer the freedom of these dangerous conditions. Compared to, living in the white man, the master's house.
Yet to me it seems kind of interesting, this whole idea that swamps kind of should be opposed to the city, or that we're trying to get rid of them because I mean, sure, they do pose some threats, let's say, but they are also inherently regenerative. Like, they act as a sponge for bad weather conditions, which can prevent flooding as well. And then kind of, paving them out or like taming them, draining them, doesn't really help in places with kind of bad weather conditions like these, or it's not super beneficial for the urban landscape, I feel.
When I was looking at the second song, it's from the album City Swamp by Jake Long. He's from London, and it's a jazz album. It came out maybe a month ago. So also very interesting to see how swamp pop influenced, I think, the swamp jazz or jazz in general, I think. Because the song that I particularly liked is called Ideological Rabble, which is like super interesting, first of all, name to put on a swamp themed album, I guess. But it goes into it's a really piercing sound, and like as if the swamp like goes seeps into the city, and then it's magical, but it's also very kind of, you have this feeling of decay, of fear, as if like very complex. And I think when you say like how do we perceive the swamp in opposition to the city, the text that I was reading says that we can see the swamp as a body that kind of functions with the city, and every single organ as if in the body is connected. So you have kidneys, you have lungs, you have brain, it all comes together. And sometimes, I don't know, it's just so complicated to think about it for me, because it's very based on very like many contrasts, and I don't think it can be a symbiotic relationship. But maybe if we kind of adapt the thinking of swamp pop and swamp jazz and films or poetry, maybe this kind of, rethinking even landscape of the city could be something new.
Yeah, actually, I think the idea of the swamp as a body is super interesting, because there's this book I read a few years ago called Froth on the Daydream by Boris Vian. And it's about this group of friends, but mainly about this protagonist named Chloe. And her name also is a reference to the Duke Ellington song Chloe, in which he sings, "I'll go through the dismal swampland searching for you, for if you are lost, let me be there too." And so this character was kind of introduced through that song in the book. And anyway, so it follows two couples which are together groups of friends, but Chloe's the main one, and she kind of gets diagnosed with having a water lily in her lung, a disease that was kind of, made to be...
I read this book. Oh, I loved it.
It's so good, right?
Yeah.
After the whole plot.
Yeah. No, the lily, because there's also a movie out of it.
Yeah.
With
Mood Indigo.
Yeah, like...
Oh my god.
No,
Yeah.
really?
Come
I think I
on.
watched it.
Yeah, like with the person who played Amelie.
Amelie,
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember I read by Boris Vian.
Yeah.
Everything. No, I'm so sorry. I got so excited because I was obsessed with that book when I was
loved
like 14.
it as well, right?
Yeah, when
It
I,
seems so good. I wanna
Guys,
read it.
everything is connected.
Everything
Yeah.
is
As
if in the
connected.
body.
Yeah.
Crazy.
okay, sorry, continue.
Yeah.
No, okay. So she got a water lily in her lung, which was used as a metaphor for cancer and terminal illness. And the only thing that would kind of make her feel better was if she was surrounded with flowers. So because of this, her boyfriend kind of took on a bunch of different jobs just so that he could pay for the flowers and for her treatment. However, she died anyway, and kind of so did the whole world that she belonged into. So what was once kind of this very happy and very, very rich group of friends turned in the end kind of to this symposium of like moral degradation, essentially. And actually what's interesting to me about this is that the swamp here is both literal and metaphorical, where Chloe is literally eaten by the swamp because of the water lily. And water lilies are native to swamps. They grow from the muddy bottom of a body of water, and they oftentimes grow excessively and kind of like fully cover the surface of swamp areas, restricting light flow to the bottom, as well as restricting like the passage of any boats or something like this. So in essence, the swamp kind of ate her whole body, and because of that she died. So she was literally consumed by the swamp, while her friends' lives, which were influenced indirectly by the growth of this water lily, were kind of sucked dry because like there was one girl who like killed someone, and they all became kind of really crazy also because they just used up so much of their money that they didn't have any more money left. So in the end, they kind of like, because of this swamp interference in a sense, they all slipped into poverty and insanity and stuff like this. Which also kind of reminded me back again to like the Duke Ellington song. Because, you know, all of them went kind of through the dismal swampland. They kept searching for her, but they didn't find her. And in the end, they were taken away, and their kind of riches became into rags, in a sense.
Yeah, like the idea of like getting stuck in the swamp is, I think, something that we haven't touched upon that much besides this, and this is what my research revolves around. So because basically I wanted to take you even further south with our journeys to Argentina, and talk about this movie La Ciénaga, which translates from Spanish to the swamp. So it's literally in the movie. So I was like, I have to do a research about it because I really, really like the movie, and I rewatched it recently, and the swamp plays a very interesting role there. So basically, the movie is directed by Lucrecia Martel, and it was highly like praised and acclaimed, and it was her debut, and it is considered to be one of the best 21st century Argentinian film. And she herself, Lucrecia Martel, is recognized as one of the best Argentinian directors. And the film is set in the high plains of northwestern Argentina, so basically where Martel is from. And the film follows two cousins, Mecha and Tali, and their large families. And Mecha is an alcoholic who despises her Amerindian servants and is like overly racist towards them, and she mostly just leisures in her large but decaying villa with her family. And Tali lives in a modest house with her husband and children in the city, but she often visits Mecha to escape her claustrophobic home because the villa is quite spacious. And the children are often left alone and play by the filthy pool, or go to the river with a dam, or just bustle through the highlands with rifles. And them being left alone, but also everybody like just being so careless, results in many injuries, and almost each character at one point is physically scarred through an alcohol-induced fall or fight or accidents while playing with the rifles. This is kind of like the plot, that basically there are a lot of like secrets, vices, family dramas that are just being not spoken really, and nothing really is there like overtly said out loud. Like everything, you just have to kind of figure out what's going on, but basically everything leads to like a climax towards the end where everything just like falls down. Everything revolves around the swamp because these are the natural surroundings of the villa, but also the city where Tali, the cousin, lives is also called La Ciénaga, which means swamp. And basically swamp is inescapable there, both literally because of the sounds that you hear constantly, which I'm going to be talking about later, but the swamp is also existing in this movie metaphorically, as I believe it reflects on the family's bourgeois decadence. I wanted to focus kind of on the sound in the movie, because what is interesting is that Martel, I'm going to quote right now, in one of the interviews said that from the very beginning, even when she's writing, she thinks a lot about the sound. To quote, many elements of my work in cinema come from oral storytelling and oral tradition. I think about sound and the rhythm of the sound. It makes it easier to shoot the scene because you know exactly what you're supposed to hear and whether there's some sound in the scene. When you have that clear, you don't need too much narrative material. This kind of brings me to this article that I read about the movie, which is called Swamped in Sound, the sound image in Lucrecia Martel's The Swamp. and it's authored by Liz Green. And yeah, the author argues there that the soundscape, being often non-naturalistic, brings the audibility of the movie to the fore and not the visual aspects of it. And that, yeah, the sound image becomes more informative of the plot and of the characters than what we actually see, which I think is super interesting, especially that we consider film as such a visual medium. And throughout the paper, Greeny makes this shot-by-shot analysis of the first scene, like the very first one. The author just kind of like, the scholar goes through different sounds that you can notice, such as rumbling of the thunder or the natural sounds of birds, cicadas, and wind. So like all of the sounds that are kind of intertwined with the sounds of the swamp. But they are juxtaposed with the human noises of rattling ice in wine glasses and dragging chairs, which become like more and more to the fore and more annoying. Through this analysis, Greeny argues that basically the audio basically conjures, I'm quoting, an audiovisual image of the living dead or creatures from the swamp. And that basically what we hear is kind of like reflecting the inner states of the characters. And I think this ties nicely with this another article that I read that basically traces the barking voices, that traces barks of dogs that are present throughout the movie, and like it is authored by Andrea Navidad, and the scholar in that paper draws heavily from Derrida, and the term animot. So basically it's like the conjugation of animo and mo. Animo meaning in French animals and mo meaning word, and basically Derrida, through like making this neologism,
He loves his portmanteau.
tries to like kind of bring back the agency of the non-human subjects, because it's supposed to like disrupt and confuse the human language because it's spelled differently, but it sounds the same as basically the word animal in French. So it's supposed to just confuse and bring this like kind of sort of creature that has their own agency with their voice, and that forces humans to listen. And the author takes that theory and traces like the sound of that the dogs make throughout the movie, because basically there is this like small child, Luciano, who constantly hears the barking sounds of dogs. And in the beginning, the child is just very curious about it, but then he hears this story about kind of like a dog, but also a non-dog, Peritorata, which basically is a monster, and it's his sister who tells him that. And then ever since the moment he hears the dogs barking, he becomes even more and more like stressed out because he never can see the dog, which like draws on the acousmaticity of the sounds, because if you can't see it, you start like making your own projections of what it can be. So basically the dog, it's like this paradox, because we can hear that it's a dog, but because we don't see it, we assume that it can be something different. And that's what Luci, the child, goes through. And basically the dog becomes more and more estranged throughout the movie, which ultimately leads to the child's death, because he's so desperate to see who's producing the sound that he climbs a ladder and falls. And basically, the author argues that reading this movie through this way, we can see how the movie kind of defies the Western logics of either or, but kind of privileges the non-human sounds as the sounds that are both and logics, basically, that some things can exist together, like, for example, the mythic and the real, the human and the post-human and the non-human, and kind of, privileges the sound of the animals. And I think this theory can be just woven together with basically interpreting the whole soundscape of the movie. That basically through privileging the sound, the swamp kind of regains the agency in that movie, and then forces the family to reflect on what's their condition. Because like that's the last thing I wanted to like talk about that kind of weaves these two theories, is that there's this very interesting scene when there's a literal portrayal of the swamp, because while the children are just running through the highlands with the rifles, they see a cow stuck in the swamp, and they decide to leave it. And then in the middle of the movie, the cow is revisited a couple of days later, and they stumble upon it again, and basically the cow is dying because it wasn't able to get out of the swamp. So they decide to shoot the cow and just kill it. And I kind of see the cow stuck in the swamp as a metaphor that reflects on the condition of Mecha. So like the main figure, who's an alcoholic matriarch, who and her other family members are basically decaying in the villa, because throughout the movie we often see them lying leisurely in beds, not being able to move, and like while it seems like a leisure, they literally just do not move from their beds. They're kind of stuck to it because they're either like hangover or just don't see the point of doing anything else. And the conditions are more than irritable. We hear clinking rattling glasses echoing in the background, constant phone calls that Mechat refuses to answer, and also the ominous music that arises from the natural sounds of the storm, or the gunshots that children make, or the pouring water and birds chirping. So therefore, just as the cow is stuck in the swamp, so are the family members stuck in their own vices, secrets, dramas, and emotions. And yeah, the alcoholism, decaying bourgeois mindset, hidden affairs, forbidden loves, fears, and tensions literally swamp them to the confines of their beds to which they are stuck. And interestingly, there's only like one outlet that helps them escape their condition, which is broadcasting the apparent appearance of the Virgin Mary in the town nearby. And they're just like hooked to it. They're just like lying in their beds watching the Virgin Mary appearance. But the concluding, but in the final scene, when the family learns about the death of the child, one of the daughters decides to go to see the Virgin Mary, and she returns to the villa, and she just stretches by the pool in a low chair next to her sister and just says, "I didn't see anything," which kind of sees that like even this like sort of religious escapism is not enough for them to continue just being swamped in their condition. And that reflects what Martel herself says on the movie, and I'm quoting now, that in the Argentinian middle class, there is a lack of philosophy, a lack of goals, and a lack of ideology in the middle class. It is as if some new vision is missing, some trust in the possibility of changing through your own will. So basically, these people just remain in their condition, and the sounds of the swamp kind of reflect on it and force them to be kind of like suffocating in it. And also we as the viewers are suffocating.
Actually, I was thinking, because you talked like first about the dog, this kind of like apparition, and then also you mentioned Virgin Mary after, and I think that's like, especially in like these kind of esoteric appearances of things, people use that as a sense of escapism. Like they'll be like, oh, like the Virgin Mary is crying. You know, it's like this miracle almost, and people are really, I think, hooked onto those things. And when I was reading about swamps, I also learned that a lot of people in like the surrounding area of like in the south would go to the swamp in order to like kind of trace these folkloric stories and to be able to see these apparitions. So there was this one story about this like indigenous maiden who died in the swamp, and a bunch of people would go to the swamp just to be able to catch sight of her and prove that she existed. And a lot of people do that with the Virgin Mary as well, that they will like she appeared in this in my soup or something like that. And they want to believe it so hard because it's the sense of, I guess, escapism, that they will, I guess, convince themselves that they saw something.
Yeah, but it's also like this like focus on the cultural that humanity seems to cling to, instead of like trying to like shift their focus on the natural and listen to what the natural has to say. Because like that's I think what was like missing from my conclusion is that all of these sounds of the natural basically become the animates that speak their distinctive language, but moreover they surround and observe the already desolated and given family, and through this way like the natural, the swamp, is being freed from its binary inanimate category and becomes the plural being with its own agency that slowly but surely seeps into the family's life and begins to take over them. And yeah, I think the last thing that was in my mind is that this is like another I can't find it. Yeah, like there was this another scholar that basically said that that like everything in this movie, from the way the shots are produced and the angles are formed, but also the sounds, like is designed to make also the viewer feel very surrounded and like very like almost asphyxiating, like there's no air, which kind of like reflects the middle class condition in Argentina.
It's funny that like the swamp maybe only has like this, or not only, but people have given agency to the swamp only through like figures from folklore, that there's this like person in the swamp waiting for you, or there's this history that's connected to
as
like
in the music
human
video that I said before,
and
somebody's waiting for you
exactly
and
in the swamp
to rescue you from these like modes of power, I guess, that the security guard that I mentioned before kind of represents. And it's funny because it's almost always a woman.
It is always
or a
almost,
religious figure,
not
which is
even
also
the
a
swamp.
woman, but yeah.
But it's like, yeah, why does the swamp only have agency when it's like connected to these like mysteries? Like the nature itself is actually also calling, I guess, upon us. And if we welcome, I mean, nature welcomes, I guess, the people that need it the most. In some sense, I was also looking at like bog bodies. Do you guys know what that is?
Bog
Yeah.
bodies?
Yeah,
No.
bogs are, I guess, similar to swamps. They're like also wetlands. They have something called peats, I guess. And basically, if you are to fall into that, your body will be preserved. So your skin and organs will be preserved.
Damn.
So that you will be this kind of like shriveled up, but mummified thing. And it's
like
really
Voldemort.
yeah,
Why is
they
that
like they
green
really
now?
like they look a
would
bit
love
like
that.
that. But it's because of like the calcium and the like highly acidic water,
You
low
trend them on
temperature.
TikTokers.
Yeah,
Get
like
your
go to
body
the swamp.
preserved in a
Yeah,
bog.
That sounds
exactly.
super appealing.
I mean, it's just interesting that like humans can be preserved if you were to fall into the
like
swamp.
naturally.
Yeah,
Damn.
like- kind of crazy. And they like these bog bodies are I think
But
they
is it
exist
bec-
all throughout like Europe, I think probably in other areas as well, mainly in like where peatlands are.
But is it because like this, like the bog cannot break down certain human components?
There's,
like, how does
there's
it
some
work?
chemistry
Yeah,
about
chemistry.
it that I
Okay,
don't.
that's not our
Yeah,
field.
I'm like not well versed in that, but it is just an interesting phenomenon. And I don't know, this idea of like being stuck,
Yeah.
and yet also your like body is preserved. I don't know,
It's like
some kind of metaphor in there.
the book Cities and Wetlands literally finishes with the sentence, "Long live the wetlands." Which here,
Our motto.
oh my god.
Long
What's
live
the
the
book?
wetlands in us.
Cities
Yeah.
and wetlands.
Like
What?
Cities and wetlands.
Oh, okay.
book recommendation
Yeah.
from us to you.
But that's like the most, at least for me, that's the most interesting thing about swamps and bogs and bayous and any sorts of like environments like these that are blends of land and water and whatnot, it's how kind of like how much they're able to hold, first of all, and how much they're able to regenerate as well. Like, it's kind of, in essence, like this, it's also kind of like a body, because our organs are self-regenerating. If we eat enough nutrients and everything like this, our body, you know, will function optimally with regenerating whatever organ that you need to. And that's also kind of like the swamp, in essence. Like, it holds so many memories. It holds kind of material remnants of interventions, of animals, animal skins, but at the same time, it grows anew, but with that kind of past embedded in it. So I think that's also like, it's a very cool ecosystem to also kind of research like a place's past, essentially, but also kind of like showing the future. I don't know, like, it has like a very interesting temporality.
It's like a weird, like a quality that's maybe also not really, you can't pin it down, and also it's not easily archivable. I guess nature in general, but especially the swamp, it's like, it's a wetland as well, so you have to like venture in. You can't just walk in. You need to like have certain skills to be able to navigate that environment. And yeah, I guess it's if you don't have those skills, you're fucked, and you become a bog body.
And it can also be so silent, yet and I think the silence is like
noisy.
Exactly. Like, and that's where maybe a lot of like this, you know, the sounds that they used in the film, or that they created in the film, is inspired from that kind of ominous silence, or like almost this psychotic state that you can get when it's like too silent, where you don't even hear your footsteps or something like that, that everything just becomes super loud. And that, I feel like a lot of like, and that also connects to like this ghostly realm, or like the ghost of the swamp, for example, with which then, you know, kind of harks back to like mythologies and like tales that you tell from, you know, just, how is it called, maiden tales, grandma tales,
like things that are passed down
orally.
Oral
tales.
And maybe that's why like sound is such a important factor when talking about the swamp, because there's so many sounds yet a lack of them, and swamps are such an old ecosystem where they are kind of talked about orally mostly. Even when like researching literature about the swamp, I found very, very little like in relation to my own theme. And I think like it's one of those places where oral tradition still kind of has a hold.
And I think that's also what we kind of delved into deeper like last episode with the field fiction sound piece, which was literally a sound piece. You don't have really a theory there. You just go into the swamp and listen however you like.
I'm surprised we didn't end up talking about Shrek. Because I remember all of you were so excited. Because like also thinking about it, like now I was thinking about what you were saying, and also how swamp seems to be so scary and like as it is depicted in the popular culture. But also like if you think about the things that you were listening, like hearing about swamp, or like engaging with swamp in any way that you were a child, it was always in like a cartoon where like people would fall into the swamp and be like, oh, I can get out something. And like literally Shrek is the only like piece that represents swamp nicely.
But even then it's like people are scared of him, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
rewatch
Yeah,
this film.
But it's
He's
kind of like
banished.
reclaiming swamp.
Yeah, it's funny because
Destigmatizing it.
literally, like when I was reading about the escaped slaves, it was also that their masters would like tell them that the swamp is a scary place, and yet they still ran to it
Because
And-
it was still better than them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like there was initially like fear also but instilled into them, and then actually they realized this is way better than this bullshit that we have to endure, you know. So yeah, I guess we're reterritorializing.
Well,
Thank you guys for listening and tuning in. Yeah, please
Give us a follow.
feel free to like also add your own connections. Maybe we can like
Yeah.
find a way
You can also answer our question if you're listening on Spotify. We have a Q&A section, so you can answer
Okay.
our questions. But if you have more to say, you can also email us. We will leave the email address in the description. So I hope you enjoyed. We all hope you enjoyed, and we all hope you stay swampy.
Give me good time.